When I heard about The Evil Within, I was excited to find out the director was none other than Shinji Mikami, the man credited with creating the Resident Evil video game franchise. So I was very excited to jump into Mikami's latest take on the genre. I should warn you that this game is rated M for mature audiences, and as such, the footage I'm using in this review will also contain mature content. The M rating is for language, violence, and gore. I want to do a basic walkthrough of the early parts of the game and talk about my experience with the gameplay. Then I'll go into what I thought of the story and other elements with minor spoilers. So, we begin by stepping into the shoes of Detective Sebastian Castellanos. During the game, we follow Sebastian through both ominous and hellacious scenarios. The first core game mechanic introduced is sneaking. Here we can see the pop-up tutorial shows you exactly how to sneak up on another character. So my gaming instincts tell me that I need to use this skill to sneak up on this big guy here in order to eliminate him with that knife I just picked up. And he doesn't like that. Okay, so maybe I misunderstood what I'm supposed to do here. Let's try watching for a moment. Ah, okay, so we're supposed to wait for him to walk away and then sneak up and grab the keys. Okay, alright, so that was just a misunderstanding. So what the game's teaching me is that I shouldn't attack enemies, I should try to sneak past them. That's cool, I like that. The next mechanic we're taught is hiding. Okay, so let's have Sebastian hide in this locker until our chainsaw-wielding captor leaves the room. Alright, I think he's gone. As we enter the next area, it's laid out like a room within a slightly larger room. Okay, so this is obviously designed to allow you to sneak around the middle area, except one of the doorways is blocked off. This forces you to sneak through the middle area where Mr. Chainsaw Man is angrily patrolling. So all my sneaking instincts as a gamer tell me to examine this guy's pattern and wait for my opportunity to get past him. As soon as he walks to the far end of the room, I make my move. Unfortunately, he sees me before I can get away, and it ends poorly. Okay, let's try again. Maybe I haven't seen his whole pattern. Ah, okay, so now he's walking outside the middle area of the room. Now's my chance. And he sees us again. Alright, this is getting frustrating. What makes a survival horror game fun are the near-deadly escapes and tense moments. If you repeatedly butcher the player, the shock of dying loses its effect and the player stops caring. What happens now is I've been killed so many times that the horror is gone, and now I'm willing to try anything just to get to the next part of the game because I'm not enjoying this part of the game. Alright, so let's just try walking right in the front. Alright, what's this? A glass bottle? Well, the game hasn't told me what to do with this yet, but fortunately I've played other games like The Last of Us, and I already know what to do. So if I throw this bottle over here, it will distract Mr. Chainsaw Man and we can escape. Okay, so why teach me how to sneak and hide if what I really needed to know was how to distract bad guys? Okay, so let's do a quick recap. So far, the game has taught me how to sneak and hide, and I taught myself how to distract enemies. Soon after this, the game teaches you how to eliminate enemies quietly. You'd think these were the most important things to know about the game, but it's not so. In fact, I didn't even use the hiding mechanic again until I was about 75% through the game. So what had I been doing this whole time? Well, most of the game requires you to walk around scary environments until you find bad guys and then kill them using a variety of weapons in order to progress to the next scary place. As soon as the tutorial ends, you're free to explore your current location. It's a creepy, rundown shantytown straight out of Resident Evil 4. Your goal here? You have to get this gate open by breaking free this scary chainsaw guy, killing him, taking his chainsaw, and then cutting the chain with the chainsaw in order to open the gate. How do you know you're supposed to do this? Well, you don't. In fact, if you only go by what the game has taught you so far, you'll just wander around this town forever. Up until now, everything I knew about these guys told me to avoid them, and now I'm expected to know to kill one in order to advance? The only way I figured it out is that I ran out of other things to try and wanted to see if it was even possible to take down one of these chainsaw-wielding psychos. It was at this point that I realized something about The Evil Within. It's not like Resident Evil 1, it's more like Resident Evil 4. Despite everything the game has taught me to this point, I need to stop thinking in terms of survival and start thinking in terms of this being an action game. Once you realize this, everything makes a lot more sense. You're not limited to sneaking and hiding. In fact, you should be sprinting, jumping and climbing to avoid your enemies. One of your most valuable assets is that you're far more quick and agile than they are. You still need to use your ammo and resources carefully, but you don't need to fear every bad guy you come across. In other words, you're a lot more powerful than the game lets you know. Before you leave this first area, you'll be able to pick up a shotgun and a crossbow. With these, you'll be able to take down the chainsawman and escape the area. Another interesting point is that this game has an extensive system for upgrading everything from your weapon's accuracy, to how much damage your punches do, to how long it takes to reload each gun, down to the 100th of a second. This was another big clue to me that this is much more of an action game than a sneaky survival game. Being an action game, the artificial intelligence of the enemies should be solid in order to keep the game challenging and fairly realistic. At times, the Evil Within's AI can break down, causing some weird behavior by both the enemies and your allies. Did I mention your allies? Yeah. There are a few areas where Sebastian teams up with another officer to drive back the Haunted, as they're called. Again, at times, the friendly AI can get wonky, but just as often they can kick some serious ass. Here's a very basic example of good design and gameplay. Here, the game shows you that pulling these levers causes these huge spike panels to drop. It shows you this in an enemy-free area so that later on you know exactly how to use the levers when there are enemies present. And it does so without a tutorial screen spelling it out. The core mechanics of running and shooting work well, and usually feel super awesome with very gory results. However, some of the more ancillary mechanics can be a little sketchy. Kicking flammable barrels around to place them strategically feels awkward and should only be done before you enter combat. Trying to do so under attack will not end well. Another side mechanic is using matches to burn downed enemies to make sure they don't get back up. The only problem I have with this is that many downed enemies wait for you to get close and try to hit you from the ground. So on one hand, the game encourages you to use matches to finish off enemies, thus saving ammo, but then can punish you for getting too close to those enemies. The game also includes a few puzzles to solve. These aren't particularly difficult, but they usually have an interesting premise that requires the player to pay attention to details in the surrounding environment. The last gameplay items I want to cover are the boss fights. Like much of the other content in the Evil Within, they're rather hit and miss. The best ones require you to figure out some sort of trick or weakness and can't be killed using standard methods, while others are simple bullet sponges with a slight twist. One boss encounter actually required me to randomly discover that I could hide under vehicles. Doing so causes the enemy to reveal its weakness. That being said, most of the gameplay feels well conceived with a few exceptions. Alright, let's take a moment to focus on the visuals in this game. Immediately, you'll notice the game is displayed within a 2.5:1 ratio widescreen letterbox. The result are those huge black bars at the top and bottom of the screen. This is an interesting choice by the director. On one hand, it can make the game look more movie-like. On the other hand, the game ends up feeling more claustrophobic. I'm sure this was done intentionally to increase the player's sense of being in an enclosed space. On game consoles, there's no way to change this feature, but if you're playing on a PC, you can remove them if you don't mind the invisible edges left behind after messing with the program files. Most of the game looks great, and at the very beginning of the Evil Within, you're greeted by an impressive effect. The main characters are approaching the hospital while it's raining. If you look closely, you can see their clothing getting progressively more wet in the rain. In a live-action movie, this sort of thing is taken for granted. However, it's pretty rare to see this sort of attention to detail in a video game because it requires resources to be allocated for a non-essential effect. This makes it all the more surprising when you come across a texture like this. Or this. Here, the sky is posterized and lacks detail. There's also a weird shading effect that blends with certain backgrounds. It's especially noticeable around darker edges. Even with the screen grain turned all the way down, this effect is all over the place. I imagine the intent is to enhance the grungy look of the game, and ultimately it's completely subjective whether you like it or not. I personally would rather just see the grungy textures on the actual game assets, but I'm sure doing it this way allows the game to focus on other processes. Still, overall, I'd say the game looks very good. Okay, let's finish up by talking about storytelling. The game begins with Sebastian and his team of detectives responding to a multiple homicide at a mental hospital. Very quickly, the situation degrades and Sebastian finds himself captured in the hospital basement, which is apparently being used as a slaughterhouse for human corpses. The evil within causes the player to start questioning if what Sebastian is experiencing is real or not. The plot is heavily influenced by the idea of psychological manipulation. There's even a possibility of potential supernatural elements involved. This sort of story can often lead to confusing twists and turns since the rules of how the world works are unclear. That's not a big deal as long as the questions are resolved before it's all over. Unfortunately, for me at least, the questions only continued to mount all the way until the end of the game.
What the hell is going on?
There's no time.
Not only is this a letdown from the viewer's perspective, but telling a story based around all sorts of weird goings-on opens the door for lazy choices. For example, here Sebastian gets hit in the back of the leg with a chainsaw. He hobbles down a hallway and escapes into an elevator. After a credits sequence, the elevator reaches the main floor. When Sebastian emerges from the elevator, his leg is healed, and he can now sprint down the hallway. I suspect this is an oversight, but because I have reason to believe unnatural effects are influencing reality, this might just be happening inside Sebastian's head. The biggest problem with this is that it's never explained. So did something actually happen in the elevator that I should know about? Or did the developers just not notice this miraculous recovery and accidentally leave it in the game? Here's another sequence that leaves me scratching my head trying to figure out what's going on here.
Sebastian? What is...
Stay back.
What is this? Did you shoot me?
You started turning into a monster. You attacked me. I'm sorry, but you're tainted now. You might try to stop me through you.
Wait, what are you talking about?
So she just walks away. Did she actually shoot him? Is he hallucinating? I call it lazy storytelling. Okay, in this next scene, the story isn't the issue. The blocking, however, is a total mess. Sebastian and the other detective, Joseph, find themselves at a dead end.
Can you get it open?
A monster then breaks through the wall. The next thing you know, the monster knocks Joseph down and we're somehow outside the cave? What's going on here? It's like the metal gate just disappeared. It makes no sense. Okay, how about this part? We're driving down a highway through downtown, and at one point we have to stop this bus for Sebastian to get off and take care of some business. Check out this road we were just driving on. How is this like this? An obligatory invisible wall would be better since the game has already established that immersion is not the priority. Here's another. What does it say on the front of the ambulance? Okay, so maybe we've just been pulled into an alternate dimension where everything is spelled backward. Oh, never mind. Individually, these aren't huge issues, but combined, these oversights and nonsense make it difficult to take the plot seriously. I'm also kind of disappointed with the handling of essentially the only female character in the entire game. Julie Kidman is a junior detective. She has a perfect Barbie doll figure, wears heels to a multiple homicide investigation, and looks like she's competing in a wet t-shirt contest half the time. Unfortunately, this is par for the course in video games today. It's rare to find realistic female characters in star roles in any game. Much of the story is told with the use of audio logs, diary entries, notes, and some sort of visions, but when the characters have to actually interact with each other, it's regularly awkward. It's very common for them to become separated from each other and experience all sorts of horrific events. When they do run across each other again, they act as if what they've been experiencing is completely normal. If I had just fallen down a crazy shaft that ended in gravity rotating 90 degrees and me fighting off invisible zombie men, I might think to mention this to my detective partner the next time I run into him. At times, it seems as if the characters aren't interested in figuring out what's actually going on, and would rather just continue to trudge forward. Almost as if they know they're in a video game, and the only way to survive is to keep going. It makes for fine gameplay, but it makes no sense when you examine actual character motivations. Reading the diaries and listening to the audio logs reveal the foundation for interesting character plots, but there's never any follow-through to bring closure to these storylines. In general, most storytelling is either plot-driven or character-driven. In The Evil Within, I actually have no idea which is taking place because the characters are never brought to a satisfying conclusion and the plot is mostly nonsense. The main thing driving this game is the action-based gameplay with a touch of psychological horror. Everything else is mostly window dressing. If you're a huge fan of Shinji Mikami and Resident Evil 4, you'll probably enjoy The Evil Within. And if you're not, well, you're probably not missing too much. Sorry. Whatever you do, don't share this video with your friends. Oh wait, hold on. Oh, my notes are all mixed up. You definitely want to share this video with your friends because especially if like you have friends that play video games and yeah.